So this year, our theme for the church year is find your purpose. Find your purpose in your work, find your purpose in your relationships, find your purpose in the community, in all the aspects of your life. But before you can do that, you're going to need to unlearn a lesson that you learned long ago. Back when you were a kid, or if you were a kid, back when you were a younger kid, you learned that you were responsible for other people's feelings. Not that you should care about other people's feelings, which you should. Not just that you should be sensitive to other people's feelings, which you should. But just about all of us absorbed the lesson that we were actually responsible for another person's feelings. And this happens in all kinds of homes. Now, it is more obvious in homes where abuse happens, right? Because if you have a parent who gets mad, you get hit, or you get the silent treatment, or you get berated and vicious things said to you. And so you learn at a very early age that you are responsible for their feelings because their feelings have consequences for you. But even in healthy families, we still absorb this lesson. We learn that when Dad comes home after a bad day from work, we're just going to give him some space. And by the way, that's probably not the best time to ask if we can go to Charlie's party on Friday. And of course, we've probably all heard some version of, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. If you're a parent right now and you're cringing, so am I. And my kids are up here all nodding because they've heard me say that exact thing. When we know better, we do better. We try, and we fail, and then we try again. And so this is the first thing that we have to do, is we have to unlearn this lesson that we are responsible for other people's feelings. That's their job. And as you saw when I was here with the kids, it's kind of impossible to really always be able to know what someone else is feeling, let alone predict it. And here's this. When we take responsibility for someone else's feelings, we are crossing a boundary. We are crossing their boundary. And we are over-functioning for them. And systems theory tells us, I mean, this is like a mathematical equation. If one person over-functions, the other person will under-function. And so if we over-function, if we take responsibility for someone else's feelings, then that means that they're not. And they are losing that precious opportunity for growth that the author of our reading talked about. The only way that you get to be more emotionally mature is by learning to manage your own anxieties, being able to identify and deal with your own feelings. So that's the first thing. We got to unlearn this lesson. Keep saying it to yourself. I am not responsible for other people's feelings. Again, that doesn't mean you're not sensitive to them, that you don't care. But ultimately, this is a matter of control. They get to control their feelings. You may say, but I just want you to be happy. Well, what if I don't want to be happy? I get to control that. And I'm the one who gets to do that work. So there's the good news. Out of all of the hundreds of people that you know, you are not responsible for any of their feelings. When you're getting together with your extended family for a holiday, and this one is mad at you because she's really mad at this one, but you're acting friendly to this one, and you're not responsible for their feelings. That's the good news. Bet you know where I'm going with this. There is only one person in the entire world who is responsible for my feelings. Any guesses who that is? Me. I am the only person responsible for my feelings, not my spouse, even though I'm sure he would do a much better job with it than I do. I can't put that on him. I am the only person responsible for my feelings. And this may be the most controversial thing that I say this year, because we live in a culture of irresponsibility. We live in a culture that says that the whole world should be responsible for your feelings, for making sure you don't get triggered, right? We are each responsible for our own feelings. And the hurt that we feel usually comes from a prior wound. A wound that we probably did not choose. A wound that came to us from someone else. The wounds are real. And you may have not had a part in getting it, but it is yours now. And some of us have really deep wounds, and healing them we will need the help of a professional. And others of us have little wounds, but they still trigger us. I think probably the most insignificant wound there is a paper cut, right? Sure does hurt. And if someone splashes lemon juice on it, it's really gonna hurt. So imagine this, we're out in the hall and you bump into me pretty hard. Unless you knock me over, I mean, like you can bump into me real hard and it's not gonna hurt that much. If I have a piece of glass embedded in there, anyone ever have a piece of glass embedded like in your foot or something? I realize I'm being kind of gory today. I just finished binge watching Game of Thrones, so my tolerance is real high. If I have a piece of glass embedded in my arm, you will barely have to even brush against my sleeve, and I will be in excruciating pain. And I'll probably react out of that, right? I'll yell, or I'll jerk away, or punch you in the face. I don't do that, but some people might. What we are reacting to is that wound. And so again, the issue of being responsible for someone else's feelings, how could you know that that wound is there? Now, we could just take and, wrap this all up and bubble wrap and try to make it so that no one in the world is going to bump up against this. Some people might say that what's a little more effective is to figure out how to get the glass out of that wound and how to begin healing that wound. And so for that, we may need people to help us, but ultimately, that is ours to do. So there are 3 steps to becoming responsible for your own feelings. And first, let me say this. When I talk about being responsible for your own feelings, that doesn't mean pushing those feelings down, ignoring them, making them more palatable to other people. Because, see what I did there? If I am worried about making my feelings more palatable to other people, then that means I am once again trying to control their feelings rather than my own. So this first step is that we find where our own wounds are, and we begin doing the hard work of getting healthy around that wound. So Here's one of the wounds that I struggle with. And the thing with wounds, again, think of that piece of glass. Our wounds lead to our triggers because we're trying to protect ourselves from being hurt. So one of mine that I have struggled with is I was born into this world a crier. Like my family of origin will still tell stories about when I was in the hospital nursery and the head nurse was so glad when they finally took me home because I cried so much. You think your family is still telling old stories on you? I was 1 day old and they're still telling this story. I was not only born a crier though, I was born into a family of non-criers. The person who had the hardest time with me crying was my dad. My dad was a great dad in so many ways, but not this one. He would call me crybaby. He would say, and I know I'm not the only one who ever got this, stop that crying or I'll give you something to cry about. What? My dad wasn't original? Oh, okay. It wasn't until I was in like my late 30s that I found out that my dad was acting out of his own anxiety and his own woundedness. Because guess what? He was born a crier. And he had a genuinely emotionally abusive father who would put him down for this. And so his method of dealing with that wound was to learn to never cry. I never learned that lesson. Believe me, I tried. I think I'm just wired this way. And so because he would do this, I got a wound. But my wound wasn't around the crying. My wound was around the shame of crying. And so my way of dealing with that trigger was I was simply going to make it that I was never in a situation where I might cry around other people. Crying at home was fine, but I would never be in a situation where I would cry around other people. I nearly did not become a minister because of that. Truth. Because I knew as a minister, right, weddings, funerals, like there's going to be a whole lot of opportunities for board meetings. There's going to be a whole lot. We have great board meetings. I've never cried in one. Yet. But I kept doing, for me it was like putting the bubble wrap around the wound, right? I was just going to make sure that I could never get triggered like that. And so that also meant that I was extremely conflict averse. Because if I get really frustrated or angry, there's a good chance I'm going to cry. And so that meant that I was holding myself back and not doing things I needed to do. Now, I work with a coach, many of you have met him, Ken, and years ago, I had a situation, this was way before I ever came here, I was really mad at someone that I worked with. And I was disillusioned, and I was frustrated, so I'm meeting with my coach and talking all through this, crying. By that point, I had gotten comfortable enough to cry in front of my coach. And he said, so have you told this person that? Well, that was the craziest thing I ever heard of. No. Why not? Because I might cry. And then he said something that was so profound and really hacked me off. He said, so? Didn't you hear what I said? I would probably burst into tears. So? And he just let that sit there. He's real good at that. Jerk. And so I said, I would be embarrassed. What do you think he said? So? And I had to sit there for a while because I really didn't have an answer to that. other than, and then I would die. Which if you trace back practically all of our triggers, that is always sort of the thing that we, in some completely illogical way, that we are going to. And then I would die. I had to admit that I probably would not, in point of fact, die. And so I went and I met with this person I worked with. And I told them about how I felt. And I started the conversation by saying, I am very upset, and there's a good chance I'm going to wind up crying in this conversation. And I did. I let them know how I felt. I let them know that a trust had been broken. Not a whole lot happened between me and that person as a result of that conversation. I think they kind of apologized, but nothing really changed. But my wound did a huge healing that day, because I had faced this fear and I had taken control. My dad was no longer controlling what I did. Not that he ever wanted to, but see, this is how it works. We have that wound, and we are still operating out of that wound. And I can't tell you how good, how liberated I felt after this. That wound no longer had control of me, because I was being responsible for my own wound. If I haven't already said the most controversial thing I'll say this year, let me go a step further. Not only are you responsible for your feelings, you are responsible for your triggers. Again, that doesn't mean hiding them or acting like they're not there. You didn't ask for them, but they are your triggers. And so you are the one to step forward and take control and be responsible around that. So all of that is step one. And that's probably the hardest part, which is identifying the wounds and taking responsibility to become healthier around them. And this becoming healthier around them is not going to happen overnight. Like this crying thing, thankfully I'm in a congregation that really wants everyone to be authentic, and so I have done so much healing around it, and I am absolutely sure that there are certain situations I could be in where if I started crying, I would feel that shame again, and I would once again have to do that work. So these wounds can take a long time to heal, and most likely we need other people to help us. We need a therapist, we need a coach, we need a circle of friends who we can just check in with periodically to say, I've identified this thing about myself, and I'm really working on this, and I hope that I can kind of process this with you. So the second step of being responsible for our own feelings is communicating clearly and directly. Now we should do that about everything, but especially about our feelings. As our kids pointed out to us, it's really quite simple. The best way to let other people know our feelings is to tell them what our feelings are and not make them guess, not try and make them responsible, and to have conversations about them. Not to put blame on them, but to share with them what we are going through and why we might be doing some of the things that we're doing, and to make our own commitment towards health. There's something that became part of UU youth culture that I think is absolutely wonderful. And that is, and I think this started quite a while ago, the word ouch. When they are in their gatherings, if someone says something that they find hurtful, if there's a microaggression, they really put a lot of weight towards being authentic. And so part of being more courageous is that when they feel that hurt in their little gatherings, someone will say, ouch. that is the start of another conversation. At that point, then the group will talk about why ouch, and this can be a dialogue. I am concerned within our larger world of Unitarian Universalism, and we may not use the same words outside of Unitarian Universalism, but I think we see this happening in our culture. At some point, we adults heard about this whole ouch thing and thought it sounded pretty nifty. And what I have seen, not at this church, again, this is the larger context of Unitarian Universalism, is people will sometimes in a conversation say the word ouch, and it's a conversation stopper, right? You are saying something that hurts me. I don't want to hurt. I am going to say ouch so that you will stop doing it. Again, ouch may not be the word, but outside of Unitarian Universalism, I bet you can think of some examples of this in online discussions where someone says, this is a trigger for me, you must stop. When we do that, we may be clearly communicating, but we are still making someone else responsible for our feelings. Can you get that? Ouch should never be the end of a conversation. It should always be the start of it. Hey, you know what? I have this wound and I'm working on it, and when you say something like that, it hits this wound. And I know that my wound is my own, but I just want you to know this is hurtful to me. Not demanding them to change, but expressing what is so for you. If I had a different husband than the one who I do, if I had married someone like my dad, I didn't marry someone like my dad, then I might have had a spouse who shared that discomfort with tears. And this person might kind of tease me, make fun of me whenever I cry. And so part of me saying what is so for me is to say, you know, you do this teasing, and teasing, by the way, is not a bad thing. Again, if I don't have a wound right here, it's not going to hurt. And so that's why we have to say, honey, this hurts, and it's my wound, and I'm working on it, but I want you to know that at this point, this still hurts. We are communicating that without blaming the other person or demanding that they do something different. Now, step 3 is we establish boundaries based not on self-protection, but based on self-definition. That's one you may need to sit a little while with. Because when I first learned about it, it was one of those things where I was like, yeah, okay, I think that's true, but boy, like, where's the line? And it took me about a month of sitting with that. Because usually when we think about boundaries, we are thinking, right, about protecting ourselves. We don't want to have hurt feelings, so we're going to put up boundaries. Wait. If we do that, what have we just done? Who are we making responsible for our feelings? Somebody else. We set up our boundaries according to our self-definition. And this can be a very fine line. So going back to this example, so I'm married to my mythical horrible husband, and anytime he sees me get emotional, he has something to say about it. Hallmark commercials, I'm tearing up, oh, you're such a crybaby. Now, I've already had the conversation where I spoke clearly and directly to him, and he is continuing. And he gets to do that. Here's the thing, other people get to decide how they are going to be, but you get to decide how you are going to be. And so I go to him and I say, you know, honey, I've talked to you before, 12 times to be exact, about how this is a wound for me and I'm really working on getting healthier around it, but I'm not there yet. And so whenever you do it, it just really gets me all stirred up and it's really not helpful. So what I'm going to do from now on is if I know that I am going to be like watching a movie that's going to make me cry, I'm going to limit my time around you. So I'm going to watch that movie when I know that you're not going to be around. Do you see the distinction? I am controlling what I have control of, which is me. He gets to control what he has control of, which is him. We set up our boundaries not as a matter of self-protection, but as a matter of self-definition that is rooted not in someone else's actions, but in the actions that we ourselves are going to take. This is hard work. First, splitting ourselves from this lesson, we need to unlearn that we are not responsible for other people's feelings, and taking this on ourselves, that we are going to take back control, and we are going to be responsible for our own feelings. And the way that we get better through this is practice. And that is the only way that we get better at it. And we're going to mess up, and we're going to fail, so then we try again, fail better next time. I wish that this was something where we could just all go back home and read a book on it and close the book and go, I'm done. I got it. I'm all self-differentiated. I'm all healthy. I really have always wanted to learn to play piano. So can you tell me what book I can read about piano? I don't have a piano, but I'm sure there must be a book that I can read the whole book, and when I'm done, I can sit down and play. It has to happen through practice. So I'm going to give you homework today, and your homework's going to happen really quick. Lunchtime. Lunchtime. You and the people you're with, what's going to be the question we ask? What shall we do for lunch today, right? I'm sure that ours is not the only family out there in the parking lot arguing and, well, I don't want to decide. Well, I want to do this. Well, we did this and that. So first, everyone has to say what they feel about lunch. And it can't be, I don't care. That's what we often default to, right? Especially the grown-ups. I don't care. Of course you care. I've been binge watching Game of Thrones. I know there is food that you do not want to be eating. Put parameters around it. Maybe there's not a specific thing, but you want to say, okay, I don't want to make the decision. I don't feel like making the decision. Anything other than pizza is okay with me. And then, however many people you are with, decide who is going to make the decision. If you are by yourself, I realize that rather than this making it easier, in some ways this makes it even harder. Figure it out, decide who's going to make the decision, and then when you make that decision, when you say what it is you feel like having, do that entirely from your own feelings and not because you're trying to figure out what everyone else wants. You're trying to figure out the magic thing that will make everyone happy. Make a decision. Be clear about your feelings and allow them to be clear about their feelings. This is the fundamental issue in being able to figure out what your purpose in life is. You have to be able to work on this first. There's this quote by Henry Cloud. He says, if we feel responsible for other people's feelings, we can no longer make decisions based on what is right. We will make decisions based on how others feel about our choices. If we are always trying to keep everyone happy, then we cannot make the choices required to live correctly and freely. We can't determine how successfully we are living our lives by who is unhappy with us. If we feel responsible for other people's displeasure, we are being controlled by others. We have to learn this through practice. Information doesn't transform us. Experience transforms us. You are responsible for your feelings. You are not responsible for the feelings of others.